This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 187.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to show 187 of We the SEs podcast. Thank you guys for being here. We have a great guest today, as usual. I'm finding like every time I talk to a guest, it's just I learn a lot, which is fun for me. And I'll share what I learned towards the end of the show or in the outro. And it's just great. So I hope you guys are getting out of this as much as I am, because 187 episodes and I'm still learning. So hopefully you're in the same boat as me. And today we talked to Amin Ibrahim. He's a SE out of Vancouver, or SE leader out of Vancouver. And he's had a cultured background. He's been through different places. He lived in different places before coming to Canada. So it's always interesting to see what that kind of background helps, or how that kind of background helps in terms of sales engineering. And that's one of the topics that we discussed today. And we actually discussed extroverts versus introverts. I'm an introvert. He said he's an extrovert. And we discussed who's better at being a sales engineer. So it was all based on opinion, no facts in that case. But I'm sure that each has their own strengths, and that's kind of what we discussed. We talk about diversity on the show and what it means. I haven't talked about that kind of thing in the past, mainly because I've seen diversity in different ways, and we talk about what he thinks about diversity and how it's helped him and how it's helped his team. So these are like within the first 10 minutes. So stick around. There's a lot more conversation that happens throughout the session, and let me know what you guys think. I will see you after the show. Mr. Ibrahim, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Great seeing you today.
What was that?
Great seeing you today.
Likewise. I like the view. Like there's you in the background that looks really nice. I should learn from you, I guess.
It's live from my kitchen in Langley, BC, on the outskirts of Vancouver.
Nice. All right. So now we know you're from Vancouver and you have a kitchen. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
So I'm from Vancouver. I do have a kitchen.
Yep.
A little bit about myself. I mean, just to start from the beginning, I was born in Egypt. I was raised in England, Canada, and the United States. So always been a bit of a nomad, and did the same thing in my professional life, where I was a bit of a nomad, where I started out and so I started working for this great startup that did complex surveys, which was fun, survey software. And I thought at the time, like, oh, business analyst, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna be an analyst. I'm gonna get all these great results, find out all these great zinger insights that everyone's going to love. And I did that for a while. I loved it at the time, and then moved into the world of customer success versus a project manager, and then as a client manager. And then, as fortune would have it, this pre-sales role opened up. At the time, I barely even knew what pre-sales was.
Yep.
This is about 9-10 years ago now. And it's been great. Like it's like I've been a nomad all my life, and I finally found my home professionally, which is the world of pre-sales.
I'm doing some math in my head. You're making it sound like you're 70 years old. You don't look that old to me. How were you able to do all of that and still be like in pre-sales for 10 years?
Yeah, so I mean, when I graduated from university in 2003.
Okay.
So I'm older than I look.
I don't know. Like, yeah. Okay, yeah. I started university in 2002.
Yeah.
Didn't graduate till 2009, but yeah, that's a different story. Okay. UK. So you were born in Egypt. You went to the UK, US, and Canada. Do you feel like that's helped you in any way as a professional?
I think so. There's ups and downs when you move around that much. Like if I think about how many houses I've lived in growing up, it's a lot. Like we moved every couple of years. So it's really interesting because you become very good at making new friends. You have to be, right? And so it's helped me become quite social. It's helped me find common ground with people. And at the same time, as you jump around from these different places in these different groups, you still maintain your sense of identity, which is super cool. So you get that really strong sense of identity, but also this ability to be able to really tailor and match the things that are going on around you. And we think about that in the pre-sales world. That's so huge, right? Like, doesn't matter who you're talking to. If you can quickly start to tailor to how they like to communicate, to what interests them, you're going to get a lot further in life.
So like I kind of went through the same situation. Not as many countries or houses as you. I went the opposite direction. So it's interesting how you felt it was easier to make new friends, because I kind of stopped making friends. It's like, what's the point? I'll make friends when I settle. So it's interesting how you went the opposite direction. You know, if I were to think about it, I would have hoped I went your direction as well. So you know the Arabic culture, you know the US culture, UK culture. These are different cultures
Very
altogether. We talk like Canada is very diverse in terms of cultures.
Yeah.
Do you think like people would be successful without knowing that? But how would it help you specifically having seen all that?
Have you seen all the different cultures?
Yeah, not all the different cultures, but some. You know,
Some different cultures. Well, it's interesting, right? Because it's like we talk so much about diversity in this day and age, and the importance of diversity. And by living in these different cultures and working in these different cultures to a lesser extent. So I've been fortunate to have worked in Canada, in the US, and in the UK, and even the different work cultures there are really fascinating. But it helps expose you to more different styles.
yeah.
And that way you can be a little bit outside of the box with each of the different cultures that you're in, which is always pretty fun.
It's funny. I worked in Lebanon, so I was born in Kuwait, lived in Lebanon for a while, and I worked there in a civil engineering company. I wasn't a civil engineer or anything. I just got a summer job drawing on AutoCAD, and it was the most chaotic environment ever, where people are just throwing papers at each other, smacking each other on the head, swearing at each other. We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. And then I came to Canada and I worked at a company called Nortel, which no one's heard of. It's a small company that no one's heard of. And teammates don't say hi to each other. And as part of like, I just found that so confusing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I learned like not everybody's like you. I'm an introvert, but I say hi to people I know. And, you know, I've carried that throughout. So I don't know, it is interesting how people change, and just the fact that we are from different cultures, I think, gives us the knowledge that not everybody's the same.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you know, you mentioned an interesting thing about being an introvert, right? And there's this fantastic book I read called The End of Average. And it's such an awesome book because it really talks about how like the whole concept of averages is flawed in so many ways. And even when we think about, like, you know, you tell me you're an introvert, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you run a podcast, right? Which is a very extroverted thing to do. You're an SC, which has a lot of elements of extroversion in it. And so it's amazing how we can all kind of go back and forth between being an introvert and extrovert in different situations. Some people might be extroverts with their friends, some people with their family, some people with peers, and not with others. It's super fascinating. Great book.
Everything has like those introvert and extrovert aspects of it. Like running a podcast, the extrovert aspect of it is I have to reach out to people that I don't know. The introvert aspect is I get to build relationships one-on-one versus being in a group. Sales engineering, I get to know the product very well because I like to work with the product, and I get to listen to customers very well. I'm just not outgoing. I'm not, you know, I'm not dancing around in front of, I know that extroverts do that. I'm just, you know, it's, I think, and you get to pick up, I know how to turn on my extroversion for an hour or two. Like if we ever go to like a conference, I'm smiling the entire time, and then I go crash because I'm tired. I can't be with people. Like I just disappear at some point. So yeah, like Actually, how do you do that? How do you feel like extroverts are better? I always think introverts are better than extroverts just because I am one and I'm biased. Do you consider yourself an extrovert?
I do consider myself an extrovert. I similar to you, I prefer being an extrovert in smaller groups,
Okay.
right? Like it's some of the massive mixers that happen out there, like the big happy hours, you've got like 30, 40 people in a room. That's just like too much
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me personally. But when it's like a 5 or 6 people around the table enjoying a nice meal or in a meeting or something like that to me is perfect. So again, there's different levels and
Yeah.
situations. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who love those massive rooms and they feel very uncomfortable when it's just
My wife.
table.
Like my wife, if we go to let's say a dinner and there's like 40 people, she will go and talk to every single one of them. And she started dragging me along with her. But if it were up to me, I'll just be sitting in the corner, and whoever wants to talk to me, they can come over. But so based on that, I was saying, like, I think introverts would be better SEs, mainly because I'm biased. I want to hear the case that why extroverts make better SEs than introverts in your opinion.
So in my opinion, and one thing that's helped me out a lot as an SC is people who tend more towards extroversion, they have an easier time coming across as being super passionate about things and being super passionate about things. Like it shows. You can have an introvert who's super passionate about something and like the excitement level doesn't necessarily go that high. I mean, a good way to look at it is if we think about it like from a musical perspective, like introverts can be like pretty steady when they're presenting, right? And when they're talking and all that other stuff. Extroverts can be up and down, which is great. You get the high notes, you get the lulls to build up the tension, all that fun stuff. So that could be pretty fun.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, there's a joke, like, how can you tell an extroverted engineer from an introverted engineer? Is like an extroverted engineer looks at your shoes instead of mine, instead of their own. I butchered that joke. I'm gonna have to redo it again at some point. But yeah, like, but you can learn it. Like, I'm an introvert,
yeah,
and I've paid attention to it. When I record I do YouTube videos, I notice that sometimes I'm monotone and I have to re-record it and redo it to just be a little bit better. But these are things that can be learned. So yeah, you mentioned diversity, and this is something like kind of a hot topic right now. I don't really like to talk about it a lot just because I don't know. It's like it has nothing to do with SE skills. But as a leader,
yeah.
How has diversity positively or negatively impacted the team, if it's impacted at all?
So I would actually challenge that a bit and say that it does impact SC skills a lot, because when we look at diversity, it's also diversity in background and diversity in soft skills and all that other stuff. And a lot of times we have these situations where companies will, like, there'll be a template for what who their SCs are, right? They tend to come from this background, they tend to have these traits, and they tend to have these outcomes. And usually that works quite well, and then they replicate that. And what they'll find is that you'll start to get way less of a return every time you replicate that, because everybody's thinking the same and they're not bringing in some of those new ideas or new ways of doing things. You start to go outside of that, and then you're adding some spice to your meal, right? Like it's all those flavors that come together when you have all the different ways of doing things and different ways of seeing things. That's where the really crazy creative stuff happens, because when we don't have diversity, we tend to look at problems in the same way, we tend to look at solutions in the same way, and it becomes harder to go outside of that. Whereas when people do come from different backgrounds and have different ways of leading at things, maybe study different things at school, whichever, they might have a different take on the best way forward, and then you can get really creative in what you're doing.
I don't know if you can hear it. Can you hear my family dancing and singing upstairs, or is it just me listening?
No, just you.
All right, then ignore that then, because I have my in-laws in here and they're going nuts upstairs. Anyways,
some Nancy.
Yeah, talking about diversity, they're all Lebanese there, so they're making a lot of noise. Okay, so do you think that just having people of the same background would think the same way? Like, because I would think very differently from another Lebanese person who lived 2 feet away from me, for example.
Yeah, so I'd say similar ways, not the same way, but similar ways. And so if we think about, so your typical Middle Eastern way of problem solving is different than your typical North American way of problem solving. Like if we think about Egypt, for example, I mean, the thing that's really fascinating about Egypt is how everything still works, and people there are expert at patching things together and expert at quick band-aid fixes to what's going on. Like if something doesn't work, it's not that it doesn't work for long. It's back up and running pretty quick.
Yeah.
But not necessarily in a scalable or the best way or something like that. So it's interesting. So if we use that as an example, when you have, and we can substitute background for previous profession or skill set or whichever, but they tend to come to things with a certain way of doing things. Like you or I as SCs, we tend to we are hyper focused on problems, right?
Yep.
We love seeing there's a problem, let's crush it. We love looking for problems, we love seeing them. And people who aren't SCs, they might have different ways of looking at the world. And when you bring that together, that's pretty amazing.
So there's more to like what you're saying about diversity than just diversity of like skin color. It's 100%. More like culture. It's beyond culture. It's
culture, profession, skill. It's
parents.
Whatever parents, right? It's like whatever template you have.
Yeah.
If you stick too much to that template, you're gonna hit diminishing returns really fast.
Yeah. So like, if I were to put words in your mouth, SEs are not processes. Like if you find a process that works, you kind of stick to it and keep doing it over and over again because it's working. But SEs are not the same thing, because there could be a better process out there. We just never thought of it because we're always thinking the same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Great way of putting it.
Nice.
Great way of putting it. I mean, if we think about, we've had a lot of success where, we're fortunate in the technology that we deal with is, it's SaaS, it's out of the box, and we can be very diverse in the types of SCs that we hire and train up to become great SCs. And we've had people from such diverse backgrounds as we've hired an accountant, hired an artist, hired a country singer, and they were all fantastic. They were all fantastic because they brought something completely different to the table. Somebody from an accounting background thinks in a slightly different way than somebody from a music background or an art background. But you really start to get a lot of creativity when all these styles come and mesh together, and everybody starts to cherry pick the things that they really like from those other styles and make it their own. And that's super powerful.
I was just trying to wrap my head. Like you're in marketing, like the software you sell or you help the customers with is around marketing.
Yeah, social media management. Right?
Okay.
So it's the best way for companies to be able to manage everything they need to do in social in one easy place, so that it's actually working well and driving the results.
I use it. I use it for my podcast.
I love it.
Yeah. So
it's great to talk to a Hootsuite customer.
What was that?
Always great talking to a Hootsuite customer.
I would say I'm a customer, consider how small. I'm just one person. But what made you? Yeah,
we love all y'all.
That's I love the way you think. What made you take a chance? Or was it like, or whoever hired that accountant or the musician? Like, what made you take a chance on? Most people want to hire someone that can finish a sentence, unlike me, it seems. Most people hire someone with experience, whether in the product or in the industry. Like if I can see the musician, because they want to market themselves, they might use Hootsuite and understand how musicians use it. What did the accountant bring to the table that say, yes, I need to hire that one?
So the accountant brought so this individual worked at a consultancy as an accountant. So he had a very consulting way of thinking about things, right? Which was hugely valuable. He had a fantastic work ethic, and he was really, really eager to learn, and he was looking for a new profession. And he found profession of his dreams. He still works in the pre-sales industry, and it worked really well. Now, in order to do that, right? Because typically what happens in a lot of these situations, and with a lot of SCs, that we see is, especially if you're a small company, right? If you're a small company, you're hiring your first SE or second SE, you can't really train them up in the way that a bigger company can. So in my situation, so when I first became an SE, so I was a client manager at the time for this company, and the first SC job opened up, and I had to teach myself a lot. So one of the reasons they hired me for that role was I knew the company really well. I knew the platform really well. I knew the sales process really well, but I knew nothing about pre-sales. And I was fortunate at the time that the VP of sales, um, great guy by the name of Richard Elliott. This is a company called Response Tech from back in the day, and he would give me he would give me like philosophical guidance, right? So to this day, like things have stuck with me, like paint the dream, tell shall tell, all this other stuff. But beyond that, there was a lot of like hands-on learning I had to do. I read everything I could about pre-sales. I remember watching like YouTube videos, Steve Capper YouTube videos from like 2010, 2011. And I had to be self-taught in a lot of ways when it came to the details of the job. So in a lot of situations, if you're hiring your first or second SC, so the second SC that company hired, mosquito,
You
the
won the
second
war.
SC that, sorry?
You won the war against that mosquito.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, one mosquito zero. But the second SC they hired, he was like a 20-year like SC veteran who so like knew exactly what he needed to do and no training, any of that. So when you're hiring your first or second SC, or when you don't necessarily have the infrastructure to train people up on what it is to be an SC, you almost have to lean towards experience, right? Otherwise, you're really taking a chance.
Yeah.
When you hit that certain when you hit that tipping point of your company being big enough and your SC team being big enough, and the SCs can start to teach each other, and you can start to get a great enablement and onboarding program going on where you can get a brand new SC who's never done any kind of SC work up and running and kicking ass and taking names within 3 months, then you can get really creative with the types of profiles you can hire, and you can really start to hire for talent and for diversity. And it works really well. Once you're at that point, you're coasting, which is awesome. Never coasting, but you're laughing, which is a better way to put it.
Well, you're enjoying it, right?
Enjoying
It's exciting for you. It's not stressful, and it's almost a disservice if it's a brand new company with no other SEs to hire unexperienced SE, whether they came from a technological background or a sales background. Because I'm working with someone, and she's in that boat where there is no SE process, and she's never been an SE, and now go become an SE. And she's learning from the VP of sales, who may or may not be SE savvy.
Yeah.
But the fact that you guys have an onboarding, I think it's the big thing. I was working with my boss. We were trying to hire another SE, and he's like, this guy looks good. He's like, yeah, but he doesn't have an SE background. I'm like, so what? We'll train him. Yeah. He's like, we're too far away to train this person, which is what stops a lot of companies from hiring brand new SEs. Yeah, which kind of sucks, It's like, build a better onboarding. You'll be able to find cheaper SEs too. It's beneficial to you.
It's doable, but it's not easy, right? Like if you were that kind of company and you have to take a chance on a person like that who is going to need to learn a whole lot, it can happen. But you got to make sure that person's entrepreneurial and like super tenacious and like really, really wants to learn it and will figure it out themselves. And that's not necessarily everybody. That's something to look out for specifically in the hiring process if you are going to take a chance on something.
How do you find that? How do you know if someone's entrepreneurial and tenacious and all that when you're doing an interview?
Yeah, so it's why it becomes really important as part of that interview process to like see them in action. Like you've got to build in steps into the interview process where people are pitching to you or demoing to you and taking feedback and coming back again and putting that feedback into practice. Like you've got to see it in action. Otherwise, I'm sure like just the horror stories of people who've interviewed well and just haven't necessarily done fantastically. You've got to tighten up that interview process and make them do something and deliver something for it.
So that's interesting. I'm working with a SE who's been promoted to a manager, and he wants to hire another SE. And part of the process, I'm saying, let them do a demo without any guidance whatsoever.
Yeah. Zero guidance.
When they do the demo, give them feedback, and then bring them back for another demo.
Yeah.
And see if they took that feedback. He's like, well, HR won't let me. What do you mean? HR, like, it's, how do you know if someone's coachable? That's how.
So we do that exact same thing. We do give some guidance. So we give high level guidance. We don't want to give away too much. And actually, one of the things we look out for is who tries to break the process, who reaches out for more help, who asks questions, who tries to go around the existing process that we've set up, because that's actually, like, we view that favorably, right? Like who is stacking the deck in their favor as part of the interview process, because they're going to do the exact same thing when they're out there as an SC with closing deals and all that fun stuff. It's interesting because as SCs, we're in general process oriented. We love building great process and all that stuff. But the best SCs break process left, right, and center, just like the best salespeople do, to make sure we get what needs to get done.
Nice. And do you ask them to demo your product or any product they want?
Our product.
Is there a downside? Well, I guess it's the positive side is it's your product and you get control and you get to see if they get to learn it, I'm assuming. Is there a downside to asking someone to demo a product that they may not know very well, but everybody else in the room knows it very, very well?
No, so I don't think that's a downside. I'd say the only downside is that our product actually there's a lot of great online education and stuff like that around our product, and videos and tutorials. And it can be a trap for some people because they just look at the tutorial and kind of play that back to us and give us a bit of a training session.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to see who turns that into a training session. Almost every single person who has gone through this process, in the feedback, when it's like, hey, how do you think that went? They always say, oh, I wish I showed a bit more product. And we're like, oh, no, we didn't want to see more product. It's all about the story. So I don't see that. I don't see that as a downside, because it's a challenge. I went through the exact same interview process when I joined. Didn't know anything about the platform, had to learn it. Watched a bunch of webinars to make sure I was down with the thought leadership and all that other stuff. So it wasn't just like click here, go here, and was able to tell like a really good story. But it's like, as part of the interview process, who's going to do that research and go to the next level? Who's just going to look at the technology, and who's going to take time to research and look at some of the great thought leadership that the companies are putting out, so they can bring that into the story? Because those are the kind of SCs you want to keep an eye out for, the ones who go beyond the product and the platform and make it the complete whole, which is what the superpower.
Interesting. I was interviewing for a job like, I don't know, 4 years ago. I don't know, can't remember. It's been a while. And they told me you can demo our product or you can demo whatever product you want. And I debated demoing their product, but I went against it. I went for a product that I thought would be beneficial to the people in the room.
Yeah.
And I wanted to walk out. If I can walk out with them like saying, oh, I need to go check out that product, that means I did a good job.
Yeah.
That was my thought process. And it worked out. I didn't continue the interview process because I got another job that I didn't have to do any demos or whatever. They just, Ramsey, here you go. But yeah, like I personally prefer doing a demo where the people in the room don't know it as much as I do, because that wow factor just goes away.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess there is no wrong answer. As long as they know how to do it, they get to wow their customers.
And I think it's smart that you did it that way, because the people in the room who are seeing it, I'm sure they've seen the demo 8 million times.
Yeah.
And it's nice for them to see something completely different. I know one of my former managers, in his interview process, when he left and went to another company, he asked people to like demo Google Maps and stuff like that to him, which is an interesting thing, right? Like, it's something everyone's familiar with. How do they tell the story about Google Maps? Like, why is Google Maps useful? And that could be an interesting aspect as well.
Yeah, like I've seen people demo Google. I'm not sure what they demoed, like it's Google. Right? Yeah. But yeah, like that'll be an interesting challenge. Actually, maybe like we can get together and see who does the Google Maps demo and what it would look like. But yeah, that will be actually interesting. So when you're interviewing a brand new SE, like you fell into the role, you didn't know what pre-sales was or what sales engineering was. How do you explain it to someone brand new who joined the company?
Yeah.
How do you explain their role? What's the difference between sales and SE? And what's the difference between SE and engineering, training, and all that?
So here's an interesting piece. And so it's really fascinating how you kind of end up where you're supposed to be. So when I was in university, I studied marketing and international business, and I loved advertising. I thought advertising was like super cool. I was like, oh, maybe I'll be an ad guy one day, all that fun stuff. I remember one of my colleagues recommended I should watch Mad Men. I should check out Mad Men. So I was watching Mad Men, and first off, I love the show. One of the reasons I love the show is because it shows how, in essence, like, what is a custom demo other than a custom advertisement for somebody to see something? And so the parallels there are just are so fascinating, right? The same things. You still go with slogans and headlines, and talk to benefits, not features, and the exact same thing. I still remember that one. There's that one scene in Mad Men where they're like, oh, she sees they literally said she sees the benefit, not the feature. And I was like, this might as well be a bunch of SCs talking. It was really interesting. So I use the Mad Men analogy a lot when I explain what pre-sales is, and usually works quite well for people who know the show.
It's interesting how SEs and marketing don't work together more, or why don't I think SEs bring a lot of value to marketing because they're in the field, they know what the customers want, and marketing bring benefits to the SEs because they know how to tell a story.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in your experience, do you see them working together? Because I don't. I want to know outside my bubble, what do you see?
So we're fortunate in that we do work well together with marketing, and we're constantly having great discussions with product marketing. We're constantly helping out with SCs are great subject matter experts. If you're not getting your SCs on webinars and you're not getting your SCs out there to talk about the great things that your product does and how it helps customers in the best way, you're kind of missing the boat, right? Because we talk to more customers than anyone else, and there's a lot of value that could provide.
This happens to me all the time where someone from product management is like, "Hey, we worked on this amazing feature. We want you to run it by my customers." I'm like, nah. No, it's like you're asking me to ask them to try out this feature. They're not even doing that part of they're not even touching that part of the system.
Yeah.
Right? So why did you just build that feature for my customer and without asking me first? And you just wasted a whole bunch of time and money. So yeah, it would be nice. Yeah, maybe SEs should work on a way to communicate better with marketing.
And that's on us, right? That's on us. If we want to have influence in the organization, we're going to have to go out there and we're going to have to talk to people, and we're going to have to build those connections and build those relationships so that they do listen to us.
I love that. That's exactly what I just said. It's we should build better connections, but have you read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink?
Oh, good old Jocko. I have not read the book, but I'm familiar with him and a lot of the.
You can download the audiobook. He reads it.
Yeah.
He reads it. You're gonna feel 10 times stronger after finishing it, and 10 times less adequate because he was reading it. It's an amazing few hours of your life, just testosterone filling, which is good, I guess, my opinion. All right, listen. There's a lot of topics that we have listed that we could have touched on, but it seems that we're not going to be able to touch on everything. I'm going to move on to the part of the show we call the not so fire round. These are the same 4 questions we ask almost every guest.
Yeah.
I would love to hear what you think.
You bet.
So, question number 1. What do you love the most about your current role?
What do I love the most about my current role? I love the impact we have on customers and how important we are to the business. But most importantly, I love how I'm in a position where I can help a lot of really, really fantastic people grow their careers and become great pre-sales professionals. I'm really, really passionate about this job. I think that pre-sales is the best profession out there. I wish more people knew about it. I wish I knew about it sooner. And it's awesome to be able to see the next cohort of amazing SCs come up through the ranks and spread their wings and have great careers. That's what really drives me.
Nice. All right. So what would you change about it? What's something that's pissing you off and you wish you could change and you actually can change potentially?
With regards to my role,
or sales engineering in general? Maybe your role is perfect. Do you see anything wrong with sales engineering that could be better?
the only thing with sales engineering that I see is wrong, and it's a bigger thing, and there is still this element of the sales engineer as the servant that some people see, right? Like we're a support group, but we're a lot more than that as well, right? Like we're not just there to, hold your bag while you sell the deal and answer some tough questions. No, we're the experts who come in the room and help with that aha moment. And that's something that in general we need to get better. There's some orgs that really see it and they see SE as super crucial. And a lot of it tends to be leadership dependent. It's like you'll have a great sales VP who totally gets sales engineering, which we are super fortunate to have, by the way. We've got, that is absolutely not a problem in the current day to day. But in the past, I've seen situations where, the sales VP or whoever is in charge doesn't quite see the value in the same way. Not that they don't believe that SEs are driving towards value, but that they do see them as that subservient role, this, do what the AE says, all that fun stuff. So I think that's an important thing that as an industry we need to get better at. And you can see it in comp plans, right? Like you can compare the average AE's comp plan to the average SC's comp plan. There's a bit of closing of the gap there that needs to happen.
Yeah, like I feel like you are 100% correct. I feel that an SE can do a lot to change that themselves.
Yeah,
right.
Well, they can, but there's also, you do run into like the structural issues of things like salary bands and comp structures.
Like salary we can't control. Well, we can control to an extent. We can always leave and go somewhere else, but that's always a risk with it. But in terms of being treated differently,
absolutely,
like we have a lot of saying. If we just do exactly what the salesperson does, that's going to be our role for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely.
If we try to, like, the one thing that used to piss me off is my salesperson telling me, like, hey, Ramsey, go support this customer. So one thing I started doing is before he'd tell me to go support the customer, I would send him an email. It's like, hey, this is happening. I'm going to support the customer.
Yeah.
Just that. Like, I'm still doing the exact same thing, but he didn't tell me. I chose to do it. So now, like, I'm thought leader, I guess, within my team.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot more things. Like, you're part of discovery. You don't just sit there and wait for your salesperson to look at you and say, all right, ask your questions, Ramsey. And you can have a conversation with the customer as well. So I agree with that.
You absolutely have to. If you're in discovery and you're not asking questions, if you're in discovery and you're only focused on like deep technical stuff, you're missing the boat, because there's a ton of value you can be adding there aside from that.
The way this is something, that's why it's called the not so firearm, because it takes forever to finish. But the way I see a discovery, it's more a conversation. If it's the salesperson asking their questions, and then when they're done, they look at their SE and SE gets to ask their question, it's more like an interrogation. I mean, if you sit with three friends, is it one person asking all the questions all the time, or is it everybody just talking to each other? That's what we should aspire to. It should be a natural conversation, in my opinion, where we're asking questions.
Well, frankly, the more time I spend in this profession, the more time I believe that the term discovery needs to go out the window.
What would you prefer?
I would prefer something that is in general more collaborative. I would rather it be called a conversation. I'd rather be called like a two-way, I don't know, consulting sector, just something different, because a discovery is very much like, who's doing the discovery? There's a lot of so here's how the average discovery goes, right? You show up to the discovery session, customer shows up to the discovery session, and to your point, it's an interrogation. The vendor, right, asks 40 questions, hopefully not, but asks a whole lot of questions.
Yep.
And the prospect, the customer, answers a whole lot of questions. It's not, by how it's set up, it's not necessarily set up as much as a conversation. And I think if we, that's one thing for us to keep in mind for things we might want to change.
the way I see discovery is it is a two-way street. We're discovering about the customer and the customer is discovering about us.
Yeah.
Right. That's why I guess you're right. It's a conversation, but maybe the word discovery isn't a bad word. Maybe we should shift our view of it. Like it's a two-way discovery, not a one-way discovery.
Yeah.
Because if we're just going to ask all the questions, by the end of it, we didn't add value.
Yeah.
We need to answer some of their questions, entice them to want to talk to us again.
Absolutely.
So yeah, like I see it as a two-way thing versus like an interview. We're both interviewing each other.
Where did the word come from?
I have no idea.
Who first came up with the term discovery for asking a customer a bunch of questions? Like when was that? What year was it that we came up with that and then started to go into our sales processes? Because it's in every single software company in the world has the term discovery and something like that in their sales process. I don't know the answer. I don't know where it came from.
I don't like you right now because now you're throwing me down a rabbit hole. Now I'm gonna have to research it and come up with an answer.
Like where did it come from? And
I have no idea.
When it first came up, was it, when we were selling, on-premise software and you had to ask a million technical questions and
I sell hardware. I sell hardware and we do discovery. We do a lot of discovery.
Yeah.
In theory. Well, I just did a video today about people confusing qualification with discovery. So
that's a whole other can of worms.
I have a video. I'll send you the link after if you want to have it.
I'd love to check it out.
Yeah. So, but okay. So maybe we should have a comeback. We'll do another discussion just about the sales stage terms because the second stage is selling, or not the second. One of the stages is selling, from what I've seen, or convincing or whatever. They all have negative connotation depending on how you look at it, I guess.
Because it's interesting when you talk about like qualifications and discovery. Typically there's like a first discovery and then maybe there's a second discovery, but that first discovery is really a qualifying call. And it's a great point.
Yeah, and so in some industries, like my industry, an SE is tied one-to-one to a salesperson in general. So the discovery call, where it's actually qualification, the SE doesn't need to be there. But they get dragged in there, and it turns into a qualification / discovery / demo.
Yeah.
What kind of demo are you expecting at that point? Like if we don't even know what product it is. But
so I do think it could be valuable for the SC to be there, especially if your offering might be a bit more complex and there might be a couple of gotchas that'll quickly disqualify that the AE might not necessarily see, but that's dependent.
I mean, yes. I think an SE would be useful in almost any meeting that a salesperson go to. Is just, do you have the bandwidth to go to all these meetings? Because in my industry as well, SEs tend to do a lot of post-sales support.
Yeah.
This thing broke, come and fix it, right? Like urgent calls. So you'd have to balance it. If the salesperson can do like initial call. For example, this is the story I told today. I got invited to a discovery call, and after an hour of talking, I feel like the customer is looking for $1 million worth of solution. And I'm looking at my sales guy, he hasn't asked the budget question yet. Like, all right, well, I'm gonna come up with a proposal for you, but I wanna make sure that it fits close to your budget. Can you share that with me? And it's like, oh, 5K. What? I just spent an hour talking to you about this. Like this could have been easily disqualified early on without having to go through this. But
no, we've all had horror stories like that. Those are
I mean, it's in the grand scheme of thing, it's not a horror story. It's an experience. It's worst things. Like I've had a fight over a scratch with a salesperson, like a scratch on a desk. So that's a horror story. This one is just an experience. So,
you had a fight over a scratch on the desk?
Yeah, I'll tell you after the show. I don't think many people want to hear it. Right. So you said you read a lot of books to learn what sales engineering is. Do you remember what the first book was?
So back then, it was like articles and it was like YouTube videos.
Okay.
And the first book I read on sales engineering was Mastering Technical Sales by John Kerr. Fantastic book. All the follow-ons are fantastic. If you're a leader, the Sales Engineering Manager one that they read is a great one. And then there's six habits of SCs. There's
right there.
Yeah.
And
Chris
other,
White.
Yeah,
Sure,
the
there's a
other
Peter
book.
Cohan book there somewhere. I actually think we're in this, like, there's never been this much great thought leadership in terms of pre-sales, like great stuff that you're doing, great stuff a lot of the other organizations out there are doing. Um, it's a bit of a golden age, which is good, and it's only going to get better. The
Yeah.
other thing I would add, though, is that there is so much value. I'm a firm believer in being like very cross-functional. Like, we talk about diversity and we talk about thinking in different ways. If all we ever read is books about sales engineering or sales processes or business, we're going to be in a box. And adding great books about human behavior, adding great books about philosophy, art, creativity, whatever, you start to weave some of those threads into what we do, you're unstoppable. So it's can recommend that more.
So human behavior. Can you think of a book off the top of your head? Or let's put it that way: any book that's not sales related.
Yeah,
Will
yeah.
you-
So human behavior, influence
Yep.
by Rob Cialdini. Persuasion, he wrote that one too. Just amazing books that make you think about why people do the things they do, and how certain people fall for certain things. It's going to, quite frankly, protect you from a lot of the techniques that other people are going to use against you. Like, fun fact, when it's Christmas time, because Christmas is coming up, and there's that toy that all the kids want. Everybody wants this toy, right? They will purposefully not make enough of it so that you will promise your kid that you're going to get them that toy, and then it's not there, and you get them the toy the equivalent value, and because you made that commitment, you feel still obligated to buy them that toy, and then you buy it right after Christmas when miraculously the inventory levels come back up.
Which book did you say that was?
It's called Influence by Robert Cialdini.
It's funny. I've heard the same story on The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. Yeah. So yeah,
There's all sorts of
sneaky.
gems in there. That stuff's just really, really useful. It'll make you a better SC.
Okay.
It'll make you a better SC because you will be able to understand how people think a little bit better, and then the writing's very accessible and all that fun stuff.
Nice. All right. Last question of the not so fire round. I mean, is there a habit you're working on today to improve in your professional or personal life?
A habit I'm working on. So a good friend of mine recommended a book called Rethinking Success. And it's a great book. Loved reading it. Not a super long read. It's like, I think, 200 pages or less. Devoured it in a week and just my off time. And it talks about the importance of, and how much it's going to help your life to just forgive more. And something I'm working on, right? Just forgive the little things that don't really matter. And you'll just be a happier person because of it. And,
so I can't tell you about Scratchgate, I guess.
Yeah.
If I have to forgive that person.
Yeah. It's good. I thought it was really interesting.
Nice. All right. I mean, yeah, I'll add it. Last question of the day or evening, I guess. If people want to reach out and connect with you, where can they do that?
LinkedIn. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Super happy to talk to anybody who wants to connect.
Okay. The second last question of the day. This is, I guess I just thought of it right now.
Yeah.
If my audience can help you with anything, what would you ask of them?
Your audience can help with anything. Book recommendations are always good. I love virtual coffees and learning how other companies do things, right? So I think it's really, really, because sometimes we can get really caught up in how we do things and how our company's structured. And I love learning how other companies do their pre-sales. And so anybody who wants to share how, I'm always happy to, we'll share what we're doing. I'll share what you're doing. That's how we're all going to get better at this, by just really breaking down those walls and learning across all the great pre-sales orgs we've got.
Okay. So here's the new rule. If someone wants to reach out to you, on LinkedIn and they've heard you on this podcast, they cannot reach you. Will not accept their invite if there isn't a book recommendation.
Done. That's great. Oh, man, you're gonna get me in trouble, man, because I promised my wife I would not buy any more books on Amazon until I put a dent in my unread pile, and this might make it a bit harder. We'll see what happens.
Well, just add it to the list. You feel like you did something.
Well, I'll add it to the list. I've got an Amazon problem. I'm sure everybody else does.
I mean, it was a pleasure talking to you, and hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Love what you're doing here. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it was fun.
And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Amin, for coming on. I really enjoyed talking to Amin. I enjoyed talking to a lot of my guests, and this is no different. I feel like with every guest, I learned something. I think I mentioned that in the intro. And here's what I learned. One, about Amin, and two, from Amin. One, Amin is a reader. He reads a lot, it seems, and not everything related to sales engineering or technology. He just reads a lot, and it could be about philosophy, it could be about different things that he can then translate into real life. And so it's just interesting to see how much people read. Like, leaders are readers, that's what they say, and he proves it. So it's just, I enjoyed learning that about him and how I can actually implement that in my life, where I am kind of limited in terms of my reading, where when I have time, I always end up reading something about sales engineering or habits or stuff like that. Maybe I should be reading about stoicism or something different. And if you're in a rut and you're reading the same things over and over, maybe you should expand and look at something different. And another thing that I learned from him is that no matter what the size of the customer, you're still a customer. And that's what he basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I think he said, I love y'all. I love all y'all. And he's talking about customers, because when I told him I use Hootsuite, even though I'm not a paying customer, I use it for free. He's like, I don't care. I love all y'all. So that was interesting to hear. I mean, we treat customers differently based on how much they spend, but I think we should treat them all the same, but the focus might be different. Maybe we spend more time with one customer over another, but the treatment is always there. So that was interesting. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. What did you learn from this episode? Share that with me, whether it's, again, on LinkedIn, under the post, or message me privately if you prefer. I will see you next time. For We the SEs, this is Ramsey signing off.